Hello, everybody. A warm welcome to you all, and welcome to Craft School Jasleen's Challenge. My name is Melissa Jamal, and I'm the Education Manager here at the Crafts Council. This is our first of our 4 CPD sessions, and we'll be exploring ideas of community and our brief specifically for EYFS today. These sessions are designed to enrich your experience on the program and to support you in delivering craft school with your learners. Each CPD brings together craft educators and specialists to share their insights into craft teaching and learning alongside a craft professional who will lead a hands-on, make-along sort of workshop inspired by our signature Make First approach. So this is what we're looking forward to in the next hour or so. We will have a short introduction to Craft School, this year's challenge, Jasleen's challenge. We'll hear from Debi, who'll be presenting on creative, expressive and experimental learning, drawing on her expertise as an early years educator, trainer and researcher. We'll hear from Jo, our early years educator, who will share how the brief of community can be explored with your early years learners. And then I'll hand over to Natalie, our artist, teacher and researcher, who will explore creative learning in early years and how the environment itself can act as our third teacher. Then we'll have some time at the end for some questions. If you've got any questions throughout, please pop them in the chat. We'll have a look at them at the end, and then we will end at 5:30. So a huge welcome to Craft School. Craft School is our annual nationwide program designed to get young people making. So this is a free initiative and it's open to all learners from EYFS to Key Stage 4. So that's ages 3 to 16. Craft School is rooted in our Make First approach. It champions a learner-led way of teaching and learning about craft, one that empowers children and young people to really follow their own curiosity, explore materials, make creative decisions, take risks, and to develop their own unique voices as makers. And this year, we are so thrilled and excited to be working with our maker champion, Jasleen Kaur. And Jasleen invites learners to use craft and making to explore the theme of community. So the brief is intentionally open-ended and it offers an opportunity for learners and for you as education providers to reflect on communities and the communities that your learners are a part of. And this could be personal, could be local, global, any community, and express their thoughts and their ideas through craft and making. So understanding communities helps us recognize and celebrate the different ways that people come together, support one another, and create a shared experience. And exploring the idea of family, maybe it could be exploring extended or close family. It could be guardians for those that care for us. So we're really encouraging learners to think about places where communities gather. It could be their libraries, their space of worship, parks, local meeting spaces. And our speakers today have got really lovely ideas and suggestions for that as well. So some communities come together because they live near each other. Some communities, like the one that we have created today online, could be done nationally, globally. So the idea is very broad for that particular reason, and essentially want to give the ownership of the learning to the learners to see how they respond to the theme of community. I wanted to just briefly mention our toolkits as well as the incredible CPDs that we have got planned for the program. There are toolkits as well online on our website that are really useful. They've got lots of useful information to support you with your time with us, and our educator forums are an opportunity for you to gather and think, collect, and then come together for a little bit more of an informative chat where we can share practice, ask questions, and just talk about how the program is developing for you and your learners. That's our little poster that you can print and have throughout the program. So, our first speaker today is Debi, and Debi is an experienced consultant, trainer, presenter, and workshop leader with over 25 years of experience in this professional learning and development of early year childhood education. And she has taught in settings across the UK and internationally. It's a huge honour to have you today, Debi. Thank you so much for your time, and we are in for an absolute treat. So thank you, Debi. Over to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really delighted to be here, actually. So I'm an artist background. I'm an artist educator and early childhood consultant. And I'm going to talk today really about, before we get into the idea of community, about materials and about playing with materials as well as playing with ideas. Next slide, please. And so as an artist educator, I've really become really fascinated with how children encounter materials in their learning and development across the early years foundation stage, but with a real focus on how they use materials to really think with and through, including thinking with their hands and their bodies with those materials. And children are often, I find, acting like scientists do, really exploring those materials and experimenting, testing them out, hypothesizing to find out what these materials are and what these materials can do. And often their experimentation is about finding out about the affordances and the properties of those materials. You know, materials such as anything really, like leaves or soil, twigs and branches, or inside-based materials that might be like water, sand, or clay. And these children here that you can see here are exploring the material of light. And they're exploring what happens when that light meets with different objects. And they really did delight in each of their discoveries here, exploring those possibilities, but without it having to become something or be something. It didn't necessarily have to represent anything at all, because they were so delighted really in that sort of the aesthetics and the experience of making things and also making things happen with light, such as how that light was escaping through those holes in those and creating those different patterns, and how that patterning got bigger and smaller in relation to the distance of that torch, the light on the object. And these, in exploring these, what we might call companionable materials, they were building knowledge of that material of light and its effects on the objects through their interactions with it. And it was if they were asking non-verbally, what is this material and what can it do? And as they are building that knowledge up through interacting with it, they're beginning to use that knowledge to work with the light in more intentional and expressive ways. And they're tinkering and developing their ideas with it too. Next slide, please. So, in their book Encounters with Materials, the authors here really their research focused on two key questions that are here, and they're questions that really resonate with me when thinking about children's making with materials and that play with ideas too. And I think the first question is one that early years educators are really good at asking in our observation of children, in terms of, you know, what do children do with those materials? What do they do to them? And the second question I find is really interesting and perhaps less explored. So let's have a look at these. Next slide, please. So in thinking about the first question, what do children do to materials? What children do can sometimes appear as strange, perhaps, or unexpected or surprising. And sometimes we might discount their explorations with these materials, perhaps as they're getting it wrong or it just being cute, rather than attributing to them their intelligence for asking materials questions through their actions. So here we've got Sophie, who is asking the clay with her body, do you make a sound? Next slide, please. And here's Sophie again, sensorially engaging with the clay to find out if it's got a smell this time. And I suppose we could say that this sensorial and embodied engagement with materials is something that we can notice in terms of what do children do to the materials in order to gain that knowledge and understanding of them. Next slide, please. And we see how children break the clay apart, and they do this with other explorations with other materials. This isn't just about clay, of course, but in sort of taking things apart in order to put it back together again, and doing this over and over again. I'm sure you've seen this in your own work. And these repeated gestures are, in a way, a kind of way that checking in of that material and checking that it will do the same thing over and over again. And again, these repetitions and revisiting is part of that process of their exploration in coming to know and understand what this material is and can do. And what is needed is time for this slow and deep learning and making process, which is really important. Next slide, please. And over this slow and deep time with materials, children begin to develop and explore that possibility of what to do with that material, now that perhaps they understand it a little better. And Anna Kraft called this shift from exploration to using that knowledge gained in exploration to now do something more intentional with it as possibility thinking. So what they're doing is really working with the possibilities of that material. So let's have a little look at another example of this in action. And so this example of possibility thinking was from just last week, actually. And Rukhsana had been, since starting at nursery, she's been drawing her family now for a number of weeks. And perhaps drawing them is her kind of way of keeping them close while she settles in away from her family at nursery. And at the clay table, her educator had presented clay in 3 different ways. And her teacher had also made visible the ideas with the clay that the children had previously worked with on a different day. And I think for me, in a way, what she's done is created a visible memory for the children to connect their ideas back to what they were doing previously. And for Rukhsana, this was really, really useful because she'd been quite poorly, she'd been off school. And so this had provided opportunity for her, but also the children present, to talk about what they did before. And what it did was alert them to possibilities, further possibilities of what they might do and make now together. And Rukhsana, she began to manipulate the clay coils that are on the table here. And after this rich discussion with her teacher and other children, her teacher noticed how Rukhsana was really trying to draw with the clay in a very similar way to how she represented her family in those drawings. She was working with the clay, I think, in a very similar way to making marks on a page, creating a more 2-dimensional image, but in relief. And then Rukhsana looked at the other shapes of clay that was available. And it was as if she paused, as if thinking about that material that was on offer. And then slowly from the base upwards began to recreate what she called her silly-faced sister. So this is her silly-faced sister. And we can see how she's trying to figure out that moving from sort of something that was more 2-dimensional and in relief to a 3-dimensional form with these materials. And we might say that perhaps the materials activated an idea for Rukhsana to develop. Next slide, please. So if we carry on thinking then about what materials do to children, and when I think about this question, I think of puddles and how puddles often shout out to children as if saying non-verbally, come and explore me, come and jump in me. And it's like the puddle is speaking to children, perhaps in a language that us as adults don't always listen out for, in terms of what do materials do to us? How do they affect us? And what do they do to children? Next slide, please. So in this little example here, it was if the rain had suggested something this time. And the rain had almost, as if we could say, it spoke to Rihanna. And she went and fetched a metallic pot when it began to, and when it was raining really hard. And when asked about the pot and the rain, she said that, well, I thought that she was simply just collecting the rain. But she told me instead that she was catching the voice of the rain, which I find is really quite poetic. And I don't think she was waiting for the rain so that she could go and get the pot and then listen to the raindrops within it. I think as it rained, the rain suggested or invited and ignited an idea in her. So, in a way, we could say that the rain was a partner in her thinking with this material. So we can say materials can do things to children. They can invite and ignite ideas. They can evoke memories. They can enable children to connect one thing to another. And we could say that materials have agency and do things to children as much as children do things to them. They hold a kind of grammar or intelligence in their affordances and those properties. So it means that the materials are never neutral, they're never inert, but they're always acting on and with children. And so this idea of what do materials do to children and how they invite and ignite ideas is something that you may want to think about in terms of this sort of theme of community. Next slide, please. So when children are playing and making with materials of any kind, they're also playing with ideas that they have and that are being ignited in that process. And I'm fascinated by this connection between the two. And I found this example, this rather beautiful example, when I was visiting an early learning centre in Australia recently. And Freddie had been just exploring wire by simply bending it. And for him, this simple shape really evoked and ignited this idea and feel and memory of a hug between two people. And it's kind of like two arms outstretched in an embrace. And it's so simple, but yet so beautifully pertinent to this idea or concept of a hug. Next slide, please. And here, Lottie Boo, she's made these repeated drawings on these small post-it notes, again experimenting and seeking to find the kind of most harmonious way to describe a snail. And the materiality of this small post-it note has provided the perfect size really and surface for this small and delicate creature and its spiral form that I think she's trying to perfect here. And for Lottie Boo, drawing here is an iterative making process, a process again full of experimentation and exploration with the materiality of both the post-it notes, but also the pen that was making the marks too. And we see how she sees and becomes to understand the snail as being part of a community of other snails as companions, friends, and family. And she's playing with the materials of the paper and the marks, but also playing with this idea about what a snail looks like and is. Next slide, please. So still with snails and clay and small happenings that often occur right under our noses as we observe children really in this wonderful making process. And this is Amal. And Amal started shaping clay coils on the table. And my mind immediately went to, because we'd been talking about snails earlier, and I thought, oh, Amal's making a snail. But no, he said he wasn't thinking about the snail, but instead he was thinking about the snail's brain. Next slide, please. And so, with this very particular idea in mind, Amal curls the clay around, almost like thinking with and through the clay material, but also playing and thinking through the clay about those ideas about that snail's brain. Next slide, please. And over time, it increases with complexity, as we can see here. And in the next slide, you can see how he starts with his finger to make indents into indents into the clay, into these waves that are coming out of the brain. Next slide, please. And so not only is his finished making process visually beautiful, but he describes these indents as being rain spots that are inside of the snail's brain, and that the brain is responding to the rain spots when the rain falls. And in a way, at the beginning of him talking to me about this, I thought it was a bit of a fanciful idea, a bit nonsensical. It didn't really make sense to me. But when I thought about it later on, I thought, well, snails, they spend a lot of time in the rain. It's often when you see them, and they need the rain and the moisture to be able to move about. And so I relearned that this is not a 3-year-old who is just playing with clay, but also playing with his ideas, of his knowledge and lived experience of what he notices about snails in the rain. Next slide, please. And so I'm really excited about the ideas of children that can come from this craft school challenge that has been underpinned by Make First, with this invitation from Jasleen Core to really explore together with your children this idea of community. And you may want to think about the kinds of materials then that you want your children to become really familiar with, so that they can explore these materials with that slow and deep time, so that they can develop and play with their ideas about community to the full, knowing those materials well and being able to use them to play with their ideas. Next slide, please. And in encountering community with children, it's very much a process of discovery, listening, and interpretation. And you might want to think about what emotions and considerations and new points of view your children can give us or suggest to us as adults about this idea of community. And these children who are travelling about their community and your school's community, your setting's community, in a car or in a pushchair, or held by their hands and whisked through the crowds at pace, what emotions and what considerations and points of view do they have? And we can ask ourselves, how do our children encounter and inhabit their community? What do we observe? How can we formulate a question that they might understand and connect with? And what about children who may have English as an additional language? How can we ask them in materials or in experiences, rather than words perhaps, about this theme? And when out and about in their community, what might they stop and focus on? Does it surprise us? Are we listening to them, or are we pushing them, our point of view, onto them? And what attracts their hands? What intrigues them and stimulates them? And how could you use this to develop your thinking around about what next to do with the children? And the final slide, please. And my final question really is about how might they begin to then give shape to their ideas about this subject of community in the materials that they can explore, think with, and make through. So I find this a really interesting project proposal, and I'm really looking forward to hearing so much more from your children as expressed through the medium of making and with materials. So thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Debbie. I really love your idea of materials sort of activating ideas as they develop. It's such a really beautiful visual and way of learning, which links really well and closely to our Make First approach. So it's been an absolute pleasure to hear you and watch your presentation. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so then up next we have got Jo. Jo's an early years educator. And she's a teacher who's here today to share tools and insights and some provocations to support craft school in your early year settings. So, Jo, when you're ready, over to you.
It's not going to be quite as amazing as Debbie's, but I'm going to try my best. Okay, so hopefully I can help you guys just with the project being specifically for early years and give you some tips and ways that you might be able to start. Yeah, and just a few little bits and bobs to help you out. Next slide, if that's okay. Thank you. Okay, so the first thing that I have suggested that you guys consider as educators is looking at your environment and thinking about whether or not you're offering broad craft. I know that it's really hard because lots of schools don't have budgets, and I know that this is open to lots of different educators, so it may be that you look after children at home or something, so budget may be low. So I've said just to try to really pull on donation requests and getting in touch with local businesses, other local schools, just people that may be able to donate materials for you to use, because that could be really helpful. Next one, thank you. Next step, I said to consider the way that you present and provide the materials that you are giving your children. So obviously, being able to have a clay table is amazing, but lots of settings might not have the staff to almost monitor and supervise a clay table. So you might need to have lots of different things out at the same time. So what I've done recently is I had the shelving unit up correctly, which was obviously great for adult use, but we noticed that children weren't really accessing it. So the minute that we turned it over and we put it onto the ground, we saw a huge difference. Loads more children were accessing it because actually it was fun to them to be able to rummage in and look through and see what it was they wanted to get out. So I would definitely say, yeah, just consider how you're presenting the resources for the kids to use and whether or not it's fun for them to access and get out. Next one, thank you. So why community is too abstract for under fives and how to navigate this. So as a word, if you were to ask a child under 5 what community meant, you will get a variety of responses. So I just recorded a couple of them just for you guys to hear what you what under 5s think community is.
I don't know. Electric. Chocolate. I said chocolate.
So we got some really random responses from the moon, the sun, I don't know, chocolate, electric. So under 5s do not know what community is just from the word. So in the next slides, I'm kind of trying to break it down so that it's easier for, yeah, hopefully it's easier for them to access. So for this example, I just decided to break it down into space and love. But obviously you could break them down into all different words. It could be music, languages, religion, maps, it could be anything, but these are just the kind of 2 that I have based this particular example on. So I've just put to, just to reframe the word with understandable words that the children are going to be able to link to their experiences. So I've put space, somewhere that I belong, feel safe. So home, nursery, park, granddad's house. Love, so people who I care about or people who care for me. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a human, it could be a pet. And then I also focused on activities that the children love doing. So, for example, reading or also snails. Snails seem to be very popular in the early years. So, yeah, I just had a little bit of reflection here for you guys. Maybe just think about what words you would break community down into to make the project meaningful for your children and your co-op and your settings. Oh, and the last little bit at the bottom. Oh, I said to just make sure that you provide a variety of materials and craft opportunities and see what happens. So this is just really pushing the make first approach. So rather than, you know, having the typical early years carousel activity, kind of moving away from that, putting the materials out for the children to explore and seeing what they do with it. Some starter ideas, I just said, try sewing with plastic needles, try printing. Photography is something that's not often incorporated into early years, but it's great if you give the kids a camera, they love it. So let them take their own photos. Collage, foam clay, building fabric houses. Yeah, there's just a few different ideas. And then the voice clippings here are just some examples of things that the children love.
I love having my birthday, and I love being with my mummy and daddy to go to the cinema, because I went to the cinema one day and I did watch Little Kitties.
And I think children do, sorry.
Going to the beach.
And I think children do go off on tangents, and it's really important to listen to them and listen to the whole of what they're saying, and try not to say yes, but, and just almost listen to what it is they're saying to you and use that as a starting point. Yeah, that's just really helpful for me personally. Next one, please. Thank you. So, sorry, Maya. Sorry. You're okay. Sorry, that's how cleaner. So the next one I've put for helping you in terms of community in the early is also look at trips. So look at trips that you're doing and how you can incorporate those into your project. So for example, plan trips to the local library or the local greengrocers. Use these as a start and then expand from there. And I've just put a couple of pictures from a recent trip that we did to the library. Thank you. Okay, so a few bits here that hopefully will help you. Look at the power of visual representation. So telling stories, exploring emotions, because visually is almost how children think, and it's what they making is what they do before they can actually tell us what they're doing. So making almost becomes before words, if that makes sense. Making comes before words. I've just completely mucked that up. But you know what I mean. Also, creating a shared visual community in the classroom. So displaying the children's work, which touches upon what Debbie said about the teacher that had the pictures out of the things that they had done before, which was great. Displaying their work ultimately builds belonging as well. So that's a really lovely thing to do. I've recommended looking at this project almost as a scrapbook. So building upon it with different areas and at different times as you go, instead of having it as one formal input, almost taking it over a course of time so that you can see what happens. Think of who you can get involved. So it doesn't have to just be teachers and children. You could also include families or others in your project. Just have a little look at your setting and think about who might want to come in and join and help add on to the community project. And assessment. I've put, of course, craft school encourages and promotes art for joy. However, I'm fully aware that teachers do all have data that they need to input. So just try to use your project wisely to inform you of successes and area for focus within those areas of learning. So if you use Sonar or similar data programs, then you can use this project to help you fill in those bits that you have to do as a teacher as well. Thank you. All right, so this is actually how I've started the community project in my early years setting. So I just got a really big bit of fabric and I spread it across the floor. And then I had a little girl called Connie who wanted to come and help me start it. So we were just talking about things that she really loved and where she lived. And she decided that she wanted to use fabric and bits of paper. So she's just used Pritt Stick actually to stick this onto the fabric too. So she's done all of this. And she said that she had made a house with smoke coming out of the chimney. And then she said that she did some flats, and I thought that was a really lovely start. So I've just, so she's stuck that at the bottom to the fabric. And then what I've done is I've hung it over a pole. So that's just hung up in the classroom, which then I can take down, lay on the floor, and they can build upon it, which is hopefully what we're going to be doing until the submission date. So that's just kind of an idea of how you can visually present something that's also easily workable and accessible throughout the time of this project. But fabric is obviously just one option. I'm sure there are lots more options, but just an idea. Thank you. I've also put, don't limit or choose sort of one area of community. You can mix them all together. So I've got Gabriel here, who's building a map out of Numicom. I've got another family of snails, funnily enough, in the middle, and somebody's actually drawn their house as well. So I'm going to include photography into our project. So these pictures I've actually taken, but obviously moving forwards, I'll be including photos that the children, not the other children because I'm not a child, but that the children have taken, and that will all be either sewn or stuck onto the fabric. But yeah, don't feel like you need to limit it almost to one topic. Just be broad and yeah, open-ended. Thank you. The last bit that I was just going to say was that early year settings are busy, noisy places with lots going on. So remember, I know it's hard and sometimes we don't have the time or the people to be able to do this, but if you can, try to find a quieter space where you can sit down and listen to the children and listen to their whole story without needing to say, oh, sorry, I just need to go and do this, or I'll be back in a minute. Try to dedicate them time, because I think that's one thing that teachers do really struggle with. And it's not anybody's fault. It's just, it would be great if we could do more of that, because if we listen to the narrative and the stories that the children are telling, then it's just a lot nicer, and it gives us a big insight into what they love. Yeah. So at the end, I've just put, what are they teaching each other about each other? Because that's community. That's it.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Jo. Really inspiring and practical top tips to actually hit the ground running and getting started with the theme of community. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience, and good luck as well on your personal journey with the programme. Thank you so much. So up next, we've got our make along with Natalie. Natalie is an artist educator and researcher who will share and explore different learning approaches in EYFS, and actually looking at the role of the space as our third teacher. So we're super excited to have you along today, Natalie. Thank you so much. And when you're ready, just let me know and I'll pop over to the next slides.
Right. Thanks so much, Mel, and thanks so much, Jo and Debbie. I really enjoyed both your presentations. Yeah, so thank you for the invite. I am an artist and researcher, and I'm really interested in the wordless language of play, sculpture, and movement. So all these things are really important to me and my sculptural inquiry into the corporeal and connective qualities inherent in ready-to-hand materials. So I'm really interested in materials that we can just access anywhere, that aren't precious, that we can find in a skip, we can, find in a kitchen cupboard, and using things that children can, just access really, really easily, and for us as well. So often my work is really theatrical, tactile, and playful. And I'm really conscious of the impact the human body has in relation to sculpture and space. Like I said, I use accessible and non-precious materials to realise my ideas, and they're often reused again and again and imagined in new ways. So often I'll use a bit of fabric in one sense, and that fabric will come back and be crumbled up and used again and again. So nothing is wasted. And I think they're almost like physical versions of a fragmented memory. So the children are kind of encountering these materials again, but in new and different ways. And the materials still hold the memory of previous session. I'm really interested in exchange and transitional things. So transitional objects and how things can be carried on and moved from place to place. So I've always been really interested in observing how young children interact in and around their environment, and how the arrangement of things and objects can alter their experience of the space. So I'm really fascinated how, pretty much anything you know, a bit of tissue or a stone can be elevated if it's thoughtfully arranged in a way that children can navigate and access. After graduating from art school, this interest led me to work as an atelier, I guess, in a nursery school for quite a few years. And I really had loads of fun experimenting with different ways of creating art and craft experiences and changing the environment in the space. So often turning tables upside down, moving all furniture out of the space, using the ceiling as a canvas, using the floor as a canvas, and really kind of creating a space where children were empowered to transform the space themselves alongside the adults. After this, I did an MA, and my research stemmed from my observations there of young children aged 3 to 5 and their engagement with open-ended materials. So the different ways that children generated meaning through materials was revealed to me via their really curious and exploratory handling of the materials. At the time, most of the literature was around children's meaning making through painting and drawing. And I felt there's a bit of a gap in research. And I found my own interests leaning more and more towards material literacy and sculpture. So I really wanted my research to expand how understanding of children's handling of three-dimensional materials in space can be used to support the important meaning-making processes that are really essential. And it was really nice hearing Debbie talk about all the symbolic meaning in all the children's clay pieces. I love that. And today I'll be really focusing on the setup. So this is really paramount in my own research and the landscapes I now like to create as part of my practice. The setting for me brings up the idea of an invitation and how the environment can operate as a creative and often collaborative provocation. So I think we touched on the Emilia Reggio approach, where the environment, the physical space, is considered the third teacher. So a lot of these images that you see are from a project I developed called Project Light. And often an installation would be created that children could interact with and change as they wished. And it prioritized material over language in order to understand the world. The process was really evident in what was left behind. So trails, footprints, and materials which aided symbolic play. And what materialized during the session was unique every single time. And what was constant was the sense of community. There's a real strong desire from the participants to devour the space, switch things around. And the child really was at the heart of the installation. So things that really important to think about were how might a crawling baby maneuver their way around the space, and then moving on to a toddler and then an older toddler. So how might they see things? What is their viewpoints? And with working with this age group, as we all know, the outcomes are really always unexpected and surprising and magical. And what was really incredible actually was how much the adults in the space really got down and wanted to play and engage as well. So it was influenced, as I said, by the Emilia Reggio approach, which values using light as a material or language to help support active investigation and discovery. So it used projection, torches, and other shadow aids to enable sensory development and experimentation. So with projectors placed on floor level, with the help of carers and staff, children are able to manipulate the space in their own way, drawing light sources from different directions. And today I'll also be including some light and shadow within the make-along too. And there's one little quote that Via Vecchi, who was an atelier at Emilia Reggio, said, which he said, "I'm quite convinced that greater attention to process rather than the final product would help us feel a greater respect for the independent thinking and strategies of children. But what do we mean by process?" So I think for me, the emphasis on process of creation of anything when working with young children has been imperative. What children produce, however, is still very much part of the process and often beginning of something else. So I guess the idea that although the process is really important, the product can't be overlooked as well. And it's part of the process itself. And the last slide Mel has left is is a really brilliant example from an artist called Polly Applebaum, who describes her work as fallen paintings. I really like that idea of something sort of falling to the ground. And yeah, I just thought I'd use this as a starting point to begin the make-along. So Debbie mentioned puddles, which brings me along nicely to this make-along. The first bit I'm going to be doing is a bit shorter than the last bit. So I'm going to start off, I think this make-along will be about sort of 7 minutes, and the next make-along will be a little bit longer. I'm going to be moving around the screen, so you'll see me moving in and out. So I've got a really nice invitation. Can you hear me, everybody?
Yeah, just make sure you speak nice and loudly the whole time would be great. Yeah, thank you.
So for this activity, the idea would be that we would move all the furniture away from the room and hopefully have some hard floor. If the floor isn't hard, then we can add cardboard boxes, flatten down, or large bits of card to support the activity. And the idea is that we invite children to create puddle outlines using plasticine. You can use clay, your own homemade Play-Doh. And this could be something that we do as a community together. So a giant puddle might be made, or smaller tiny puddles, or children can work in pairs. And it's really, really squishing plasticine together to create different outlines. And this might be even around, you know, sort of objects, or it could be, yeah, just really, really thinking materials, basically doing some work for the children, like thinking through materials. And then there'll be an array of different materials around that children can fill their puddles with. So I've got some sand here, and I've got one of these spatulas with holes in them. So children could fill up the puddles with sand. You can use anything, so it might be pebbles, feathers, even more plasticine, even clay. And the next pen I'm going to fill with rice. There's some different kinds of spoons here, so children can experiment with sprinkling, scooping with an ice cream scoop. And these are all just provocations. Children might want to imagine these as different things depending on their interests. They may want to do an outline around each other's bodies. They might want to use their fingers to draw in the clay, draw in the sand, or draw in the rice. I think really from here, children are going to be just taking this in their own hands and exploring in so many different ways. I have added some few suggestions. I've got these golf clubs, which are really, really such a great resource, and they're really, really super cheap actually. And so these can be used to poke in the clay. We've got some buttons. We've got some pebbles. And I've got some tape. So from here, I'm imagining if there's quite a few children in the space, it might be quite chaotic, it might be really messy. So we could also invite children as part of the tidy up process. It'd be really, really fun. So getting lots of sweeping brushes, lots of scoops, all helping to tidy up. And I think the tape is a really, really nice idea because it can connect all the puddles together, so to create some sort of mapping situation. And and also game playing, so walking around the puddles, balancing on bits of tape. So I'm going to connect these two together. Because this type of work is really temporary, I think inviting children to take photos of the work would be really valuable as well. So they've got a document of what they've created, because sometimes children make something and they get quite upset about sort of tidying it up at the end and it being not permanent, not being able to take this physical object or physical thing home with them. You can also add feathers as well. So feathers, it's a really nice thing to add so that it becomes a really sensory experience. So that's my first suggestion as sort of transforming the environment. You might want to also create some puddles before the children enter the space, or half do some, or leave the space completely empty and start to build along together. The second activity is about transforming the space via the ceiling, and about sort of creating something that's really hanging and invites children to move their bodies in different ways as well. So I don't know if you can see, I've got over here, I'm just gonna. So this is going to be the starting point. I've hung up some string across the room, and you might want to hang up string in all directions. You might want to have, 10 bits of string going across different directions of the classroom or the room. Again, trying to move things around, moving furniture around. You might want to hang string across tables so it's much lower, or across chairs. Yeah, or there's usually in the classroom or room, I find there's some sort of hook somewhere. There's like a curtain rail or somewhere that string can stretch across, even across a door handle. You can even get really great suction hooks now, which stick to almost anything, stick to windows, and they're really super strong. And so here we're going to invite children to create a tactile sensory sculpture. Sometimes I give the provocation of, let's create something that is you or represents you, but in your own sort of portrait, as it were. And you'll see children wanting to kind of bury things in their sculptures. For this activity, I didn't mention, you can use absolutely any soft fabric material, so old sheets, old pillowcases, tea towels are going to be thrown out, that are washed and clean. Stuffing, I've got some scraps of fabric that I've got from a fabric shop, or they're offcuts. Yeah, little scraps of fur. We've got some shoelaces. And what we're going to do, we're going to invite children to create their own and experiment with wrapping, tying, pulling, connecting, and then eventually hanging. So if you can imagine lots of these hanging around the room. So I've got some lovely soft fabric here. You might want to even add some like essential oils to some fabrics as well. It's quite a nice, another sensory element. And then some children might really struggle with sort of the idea of tying. So pegs is quite a nice thing to do as well. So they can attach things with lots and lots of pegs. I'm just going to make a long and bury a bit of sponge. So I've got a sponge and cover it up, because often children like to bury things and cover them and have secrets inside their little worlds. And the elastic bands. The elastic bands are great. And I actually worked with a 3-year-old last week who was so competent at stretching the elastic bands in multiple ways. So making these little bundles. You can add some bubble wrap as well. And often you'll see children sort of layer and layer, almost like with the enveloping schema, like wanting to like layer and wrap and go over again and again and again. And they become these like big giant sculptures. Sometimes I want to work in pairs, and maybe they'll use tape. Sometimes they create something really, really beautiful, and then it's completely covered at the end, and you can't see that. You think it's beautiful, but they don't care. They just want to keep going and wrapping and covering. So I'm going to get another bit of fabric here. And I'm going to get a peg first because it's much easier for me. And then I've got a shoelace. I'm going to wrap the shoelace around. Put some tiny bits of fabric. And some more pegs. More elastic buttons. Sometimes children might draw pictures and bury their pictures inside. So a little picture, they can hide in there. When children start writing, the odd letter, they write their own, language and bury their language inside. Jo mentioned the scrap centre. The one in Homerton is absolutely incredible for fabric scraps. And I think you pay joining fee and then you can take as much as you want. So I've kind of I'm going to keep going a little bit more. I'm gonna attach this. So to attach it, the children might want to either peg it or tie some more string around, so it becomes this sort of hanging object. I'm gonna sorry, just someone's asking.
Yes, everyone's there.
Yeah.
So if you just press the button down, that's the far up.
Thank you.
Have you heard? Let's just say we will leave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. So we've got two so far. You can see there they can be moved around and they can turn into a game. So children might want to actually even sort of, draw through them. Play around with feeling them, feeling their weight, bouncing them up and down. I worked with a really brilliant filmmaker called Lydia CS, and she introduced me to the idea of like adding tactility and colour to film. So one thing I've learned from her is adding little acetate is such a great resource as well. And so you can see with the plain coloured one, the plain white one, we can invite children to lie underneath it and perhaps colour it in using acetate. So they do become really, it really become embodied in the space by lying underneath things. So I'm just gonna lie on. You can sort of Another thing to do would be to add some music as well. So you can get all the children to lie down in a circle underneath and play some music, add some acetate, add some smell. So we really are thinking about all the senses. Yeah. So one thing I actually found from the scrap centre is these really, really big bits of wadding, which are slightly transparent, and they're really, really tactile, beautiful bit of material. So another thing to add is to invite children to peg and attach bits of materials, and then we hang it on as well, and we can almost like shine torches and see through it. So I've got my bit of wadding. You could also use bits of fabric, anything really, paper packaging, and then the idea is that we use, I guess, more unconventional pairings of materials. So this was like soft material with some tape, with some acetate, which is also transparent. And we allow the children to almost draw or collage as they go along. So I'm going to place my camera a bit down so you can see. The idea of like community and I love that idea of bringing people together, or bringing everyone working collaboratively together, not necessarily in a really conscious way, but by setting up a space that becomes a canvas for all the children to kind of contribute to. So they're almost like a different material each. They're going to add something to this sort of canvas, which is the room. Some materials. I also really like to make along with the children, so that when we're in the space, I'm observing, but also making along. So it becomes really, I guess they get a sense that we're all part of the same thing. So I'm just going to. I'm going to add this to our starting installation next. And then with this. The next one I'm going to make is going to be more of a kind of sausage shape. So sort of twisting. Poking bits of feathers through. Tie some laces. wrapping around. Another thing with the hanging sculptures is the idea of creating almost a pulley system as well. So children can sort of peg their items up, but then also pull them up and down, which is a really fun way of creating movement. I'm going to add some more elastic bands. I think when you let children loose with some tape, really enthusiastic things end up happening. Yeah, so I'm going to keep wrapping and then add it to the... So these are all just starting points and suggestions. I think the great thing is when we have these materials, nothing we predict ever happens. So it will end up being what it is, and it often will be way more better than we can do, or way more better than we can even imagine. I'm going to pick this one. I'm going to try and connect these two together. I'm going to create a little pulley system now as well. Final one I'm going to make is I'm just going to scrunch a few different types of material together into a nice ball and squeeze it. I'm going to wrap it up with some string, some tape. It's all falling down 1 second. We're attaching this one to the bottom. And then we can invite children to pull up and down. And experiment with weights. Would anyone like to ask any questions at this point?
Yeah, this would be a nice opportunity to sort of ask any questions, or if you've got any ideas, we can share them. Love the idea of an installation in your corner of your room. I think that's such a gorgeous idea.
I think, yeah, I was going to say, I think it's almost taking the sort of fear away from about
Mm,
using up space and taking up space. And it can be so simple. But I think it really challenges children to look at things in different ways. And I really like the idea of inviting children to lie down.
mm,
Often they'll do it themselves anyway. But do you know what I mean? That sort of idea that,
mm.
that things aren't just on tables, that we can move tables. They don't have to be there all day. And
Yeah,
it takes 5 minutes, really.
yeah. And sort of like pinning something from one end to the other, and it changes the way the room feels, having something above your head, and then also the puddles down below. You're really playing with all the different ideas of up above and down below. And Debbie mentioned in the comments as well um, that it's really nice for adults to play as well, the important role that adults as makers alongside the children, and meeting some of these, I guess, materials that might be familiar to us, but meeting them as if it's the first time we're interacting with them.
Yeah,
And the diff
yeah.
Mm,
Sorry,
sorry,
Mel.
Natalie, go on.
I feel like that every single time. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Even now, when I'm making along with you, it's really exciting. Because I don't know what I'm gonna make, and it's almost that freedom to be okay with whatever happens.
yeah,
And also, like, I think when we're having fun with it, the children naturally get that energy from us. And I think almost imagine ourselves like I sort of like, as a practitioner, before the children enter the space, see yourself as an artist that wants to create something, for the children.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I really, really love that idea. And also not being too, and this is all about the make first approach, isn't it? Not being too bothered by the end result, because you can have an idea, you can say, right, I'm going to get felt or I'm going to get paper, and I envision that this is what the learners are going to interact and how they're going to do it. But then you get there and it's nothing like you imagined. But that is the making. Like that's the learning. That's the bit that a quick picture capture that, because that's, I guess, the special, as you said, like, encourage your learners to take pictures because they won't be able to take most of what they make home, if anything, home. But how do we capture the incredible learning? Well, we're really lucky to live in time of technology where we can take pictures and videos, and even just the way that you were kind of moving your ball, sort of up and down, a motion of that, like a video of that. And just, yeah, there's so many different ways to do this, and not one thing is going to look the same in your learning environment, and that's the point. The point is that they shouldn't look the same because the makers themselves are not copy paste of each other. So I think that's, yeah, you've really given us some really lovely ideas and scopes to play with and interact with, and hopefully just it fit to be really fun as well. It looks like you're having fun, which is a key part of the whole process. So, yeah, if there's any questions, this is a really perfect opportunity, perfect chance to ask them now. But I'm aware that sometimes questions come up after the event, after the fact, in which case, then please email us at Craft School and we can send out all the information to the makers, to the speakers. And equally, we'll include, if that's okay with you, some contact information if anybody wanted to reach out and message you with any questions that they have.
Natalie, I have got a quick question for you. What group sizes do you work with, like when you are doing this sort of activity in that kind of space? What's your kind of maximum?
the maximum would be like a class of 30.
Okay, so you do, and do you find it works with that many children at one time, or is it better to?
I think it can be better to start off with a small group and then invite more to come along, and then invite more, but also perhaps have it over a few days.
Okay,
You can leave this up in the space, for children to come back to. So it's not, sometimes it doesn't have to be almost like this is what we're doing. It can be something that's just built on as other things are going on as well.
Yeah.
yeah, great, thank you.
Yeah, that's a really key idea actually. It doesn't have to be like, right, we're sitting down and now we're doing this, because often in early year settings, it's everything is kind of on the go, and you might return. It's part of Make First, one of our approaches. You make something, you leave it, then you come back and you tweak it, and then you leave it.
Yeah, almost starting off with one hanging in the room that you've made and just see what happens. Like almost like, does one of the children come and ask about it? Are they curious? Do they want to have a go?
Mm. And that idea as well, I really liked the idea of you were putting things inside materials that were personal. That's a really lovely stimulus for the start of your community project. Me, before I look out at mine, and it's a really lovely stimulus to kind of think, okay, what can we put in this, our little almost like memory cloud or our community cloud, or something that's quite personal to each individual, and then hang them up and you have your community clouds. That's a really lovely way to start and to ask these questions and have these conversations with one another. Really nice.
Hiya. It really made me thank you, Natalie, for sharing your work with materials there. And as I was listening and watching, I was really thinking about the materials that are available in children's communities, materials that they've got at home that they might be bringing in to work with in a very similar way, in a very playful way that you are sharing with us. And how actually imagining children in this space and that play with materials, how they are in effect working together and communing together and building community through that sort of making process. And that, your point about adults joining in with children, I think is just so important, because in listening in to their play with these materials, we then we're then able to hear and then respond to their ideas that they have about what it is to be a child of now, and what it is to be a child in their family. So all of these things are very connected to that idea of community. And I think, thinking about our roles as adults alongside of children, and I think what you've emphasized here is that we are activators as well as the materials in how we curate and make choices over materials. And I think that's, what you've done there is really show that. So we're activators and curators and observers and responders and listeners within this sort of making process. So thank you. I just wanted to share that.
Thanks, Debbie. That's a really lovely point.
Amazing. Okay. Well, if we have any other questions, then please feel free to pop them in now. Equally, we have got another educator forum coming up. So if you want to save your questions until then, we can commune together, sort of unpick, ask questions, and see where you're at. So I'll leave it there for now. I just wanted to say a huge thank you to you, Natalie, for your lovely make along, Debbie and Jo for your really inspiring talks today, and to every single person who's here and for being part of the program and for learning together and sharing practice. So thank you so much, and we look forward to speaking to you again soon. So thank you for everything. Have a really lovely evening and see you soon. Take care. Bye.